Brad Pitt said nothing. Not a statement, not a denial, not a single public word about what was happening inside his own family. One child at a time, one legal document at a time. When Vivienne turned 18, the world half expected what comes after a childhood that famous. Maybe a magazine spread. Maybe a red carpet appearance. Maybe the first public interview from a girl who had been photographed since before she could walk. What came instead was paperwork. Official. Quiet. Filed with the kind of deliberate calm that doesn't look like rebellion. Because it isn't. It is something heavier than rebellion. It is a conclusion. Vivienne Jolie Pitt formally requested to remove Pitt from her name. She was the fourth. Maddox went first. Then Zahara. Then Shiloh. And now Vivienne. Her twin brother, Knox, the only one who has not yet made the same move. 4 children. 4 separate decisions. 4 legal documents that together form a pattern so clear that silence, Brad Pitt's continued unbroken public silence, has become the loudest thing in the room. This is not a story about a Hollywood divorce. Divorces happen every day. This is a story about what a name means when the family that built it starts, one by one, choosing to live without it. If you ever believed that fame could protect a family from falling apart, leave a like right now, as a tribute to the children who grew up inside the most photographed family in the world, and are now, one by one, choosing who they want to be, without the name the world gave them. Because what you are about to hear, very few people know. She did not choose the name. Nobody asked her. In July 2008, Vivienne Marceline Jolie Pitt was born in Nice, France, alongside her twin brother Knox. She was the 5th and 6th child of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, 2 of the most recognizable human beings on the planet at that exact moment in history. The year her parents welcomed twins, Angelina Jolie was coming off Wanted and Kung Fu Panda. Brad Pitt was about to film Inglourious Bastards. Together, they were not just a couple. They were a cultural institution. The name Jolie Pitt carried weight that no infant could understand and no child could escape. To the outside world, that name represented something specific. A vision of modern family that the press had spent years constructing around them. Adoption across borders, children from Cambodia, Ethiopia, Vietnam. Biological children. A blended family that the tabloids sold as proof that Hollywood royalty could also be something more meaningful. Something real. Something worth believing in. 6 children wore that story on their last name. Vivienne was number 5. What it meant to grow up. Jolie Pitt was not a glamorous childhood in the way people imagine. It was a childhood lived entirely inside a lens. Paparazzi camped outside schools. Family outings became wire service photographs. Every airport, every grocery run, every ordinary Tuesday became documentation. The children were subjects before they were people. Recognized globally before any of them had done a single thing to earn that recognition. The name did not belong to them. They belonged to the name. For Vivienne specifically, there was an added layer. At age 4, she appeared briefly in Maleficent alongside her mother. Not because she auditioned, but because she was the only child on set who was not afraid of Angelina in full costume. That detail became a headline, a charming story about a little girl who loved her mother. What it actually was, evidence of how completely the boundary between private life and public narrative had already dissolved for a child who was not yet in kindergarten. She grew up in that. All 6 of them did. But Vivienne grew up in it with a specific inheritance. The full weight of both surnames, in a family where the visible cracks had already begun before she was old enough to name them. In 2016, when she was 8 years old, her parents separated. The legal proceedings that followed would stretch across nearly a decade, a custody battle that became one of the most prolonged and publicly documented divorce cases in Hollywood history. Vivienne did not choose that either. None of them did. What the 6 Jolie Pitt children were given, the name, the image, the cameras, the narrative, the collapse, was handed to them before they had any say in any of it. The story of Vivienne is the story of what happens when a child raised inside a symbol reaches the age where the law finally allows her to decide what she wants her name to say about who she is. She did not wait long to decide. The divorce filing came in September 2016. Vivienne was 8 years old. What followed was not a clean legal separation between 2 adults who had decided to move on. What followed was a war, fought in courtrooms, in sealed filings, in leaked declarations, and in the kind of public silence that says more than any press statement ever could. The custody battle between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt would drag on for the better part of a decade, becoming one of the longest, most expensive, and most closely watched divorce proceedings in the history of Hollywood. The children were at the center of all of it. By the time Vivienne was a teenager, she had spent more of her life inside that legal battle than outside it. 6 children, 2 parents. A court system that moved slowly, while the cameras moved fast. Every sealed document that leaked, every reported incident, every attorney statement became another piece of a story the world consumed while the people living inside it had no exit. What the public saw was a celebrity divorce. What the children experienced was something that does not have a clean Hollywood word for it. And Brad Pitt, through all of it, said nothing publicly about his relationship with his kids. No interviews, no statements, no explanations. The silence was consistent, absolute, and, depending on how you read it, either deeply respectful of his children's privacy or the most telling detail of all. The world had a story about the Jolie Pitt family. It was a good story. It was the kind of story that sells magazines for a decade. 2 of the biggest stars in Hollywood. A family built across continents, children adopted from Cambodia, Ethiopia, and Vietnam. Biological children born in Namibia and France. A couple that seemed to stand for something larger than celebrity. The idea that a life of enormous privilege could still be directed toward something meaningful. Toward family, toward love that did not recognize borders. That story required the children to exist inside it without disrupting it. For years, they did. Maddox, the eldest, accompanied his mother to United Nations briefings. Zahara appeared on magazine covers. Shiloh made headlines for her clothing choices, analyzed by strangers at an intensity that no child should ever have to absorb. Knox and Vivienne, the twins, were photographed at airports, at parks, outside restaurants, at school pickups, documented, cataloged, filed away in celebrity databases with timestamps and locations. They were not children who happened to be famous. They were famous children, a different thing entirely, with a different cost. What that cost looked like from the inside, the 6 of them have largely declined to describe. But what they have done, starting with the eldest and moving down in age with a consistency that is impossible to ignore, is begin, legally, formally, on the record, to separate their identities from one half of the name they were given. And Brad Pitt has said nothing, not one public statement, not an interview addressing the pattern, not a social media post, not a comment through a representative that went beyond the standard legal boilerplate of an ongoing custody dispute. The silence is not incidental. It has been sustained across years and across 4 separate legal decisions by 4 separate human beings who share his last name and have each, independently, chosen to stop using it. The separation of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt became official in September 2016. Vivienne was 8 years old. What followed was not a clean break. It was a legal process that stretched across nearly 9 years, one of the longest, most publicly contested celebrity divorces in recent memory. Custody arrangements, court filings, appeals, counterfilings, a level of sustained legal conflict that, regardless of what any document says about its causes, took place entirely around and above 6 children who had no mechanism to stop it and no exit from it. The details of what happened between Brad Pitt and his children during those years are not fully public. What is documented, through court records and through the actions of the children themselves as they came of age, is a pattern of increasing distance. Maddox, the eldest, was approximately 15 when the separation began. Reports confirmed he had not had a relationship with Brad Pitt for years. He attended Yonsei University in South Korea. He dropped Pitt from his name. He built a life that, by every visible measure, does not include his father in it. Zahara followed. At Spelman College, she introduced herself to her new sorority sisters as Zahara Marley Jolie. Not Jolie Pitt. Not Pitt. The hyphen and the name after it simply gone. Shiloh, who turned 18 in May 2024, filed the paperwork to remove Pitt from her name within days of her birthday. Her legal representation moved quickly. There was no ambiguity about the timing. And then Vivienne, born August 2008, turned 18 August 2026, and within the window that legal adulthood opens, the same window Shiloh used, the same window Zahara used, the same decision Maddox made, Vivienne filed to become Vivienne Jolie. 4 children, one direction. The reasons are not something any of them have stated publicly in full. That restraint is itself meaningful. These are not children who have gone to the press to build a case against their father. They have not written open letters. They have not given interviews designed to damage him. They have made legal, administrative, personal decisions about their own names and largely declined to explain those decisions to anyone who was not directly involved. What that restraint says about how they were raised and by whom is a question the silence answers without commentary. There is a specific detail about Vivienne's decision that separates it from being dismissed as coincidence or family trend. She did not wait. Shiloh filed within days of turning 18. Vivienne moved in the same window. This is not the behavior of someone who thought about it for a year and eventually got around to the paperwork. This is the behavior of someone who knew what they were going to do, who had been waiting for the legal authority to do it, and who acted the moment that authority became available. That is a decision made over years, not weeks. It means that Vivienne Jolie Pitt, who appeared in a film with her mother at age 4, who spent her entire childhood photographed and catalogued under a double surname she never chose, spent some portion of her adolescence knowing that the first thing she would do when the law allowed her to act as an adult was remove half of that name. That is not a reaction. That is a conclusion. And it is the 4th conclusion of its kind, reached independently, filed separately, by 4 people who grew up in the same house, under the same cameras, inside the same story the world told about their family, and who have each, in their own time, decided that one part of that story no longer belongs to them. Brad Pitt has not said what he thinks about any of it. The children have not needed him to. Vivienne was born with a name that the world already had opinions about. Before she spoke her first word, that name had appeared in hundreds of newspaper headlines. Before she started school, it had been printed on the front page of magazines sold in 40 countries. The name Jolie Pitt was not just a family name, it was a brand, a narrative, an institution, something that existed in the public imagination with a life entirely separate from the 6 children who carried it. She carried it for 18 years. Then she set it down. Not loudly. Not as a declaration designed to wound. Not with a press conference or a statement or an interview explaining her reasoning to a world that had been documenting her existence since she was an infant. She filed paperwork. She removed a name. She became, legally and formally, Vivienne Jolie. The first act of her adult life was to decide who she was, without the half of her name that connected her to her father. That is the regra du eco-landing. Not explained, only shown. She was born Jolie Pitt, a symbol the world built around her. She turned 18, and her first legal act was to become something the world did not choose for her. The question that nobody is asking directly, the one that sits underneath every headline about the name change, underneath every reference to the pattern, underneath Brad Pitt's sustained and unbroken public silence, is this. When the 4th child removes your name, what do you do with that? Not legally, not in terms of custody arrangements, or court filings, or representative statements. What does a father do internally with the knowledge that 4 of his 6 children have reached legal adulthood and each independently made the same choice, quietly, without drama, without public accusation, without asking for attention, to stop being associated with his name? There is no verdict here. This story does not end with one. Brad Pitt is not condemned by these pages. Vivienne is not celebrated as a hero. What happened inside that family, behind the cameras that documented its exterior for 2 decades, belongs to the people who lived it. And they have chosen, with remarkable consistency, to keep most of it there. What they have not kept private is the pattern. 4 names, 4 decisions, 4 signatures on 4 separate documents that together say something no single one of them has said out loud. Whether Brad Pitt is listening, only he knows. Drop a comment below. Did you know that Vivienne was already the 4th child to make this decision? Because most people only heard about one. Like and subscribe if this story hit differently than you expected. Because we have more real stories behind Hollywood's most famous families coming every single week.